keep hearing the word delight. And as I woke up this morning, I started to think about all of you, and my heart was full of delight. Because I feel that for you people. I wish you could climb inside and feel what I feel for you. And I hope and desire that as we tune in to delight, we would learn together how to delight in one another, how to delight in ourselves, and then how to delight ultimately in our good God. And that delight would fill this place. So may we delight in each other and delight in the fact that we made it here this morning, that it's a miracle that we're here. We made it into another day, and that we get to delight in the fact that we are made in God's image, and we get to delight in one another. So welcome. Yeah, thank you, Devar. Like, give it back to the people, right? We got to give it back. I'm not just talking to the chairs, hopefully. There's a verse that I want us to look at this morning. This is going to be an anchor point for us through the next month, and this verse is going to kind of be the main thread that we're going to look through. So, Paige, could you just throw up that first verse? And I'd like you to listen very carefully to these words. This comes out of Psalm 127, out of the Psalm of Ascent. Don't you know he enjoys giving rest to those he loves? And when you hear that, I wonder, like, how do you hear that? When it is spoken to you, when you read it, when you receive it, what does it feel like for you? Where do you feel it in your body? How does it resonate in your spirit and your mind? Does it feel like an invitation, or does it feel like, oh no, they're gonna ask us to do something else in addition to everything that we're already doing? Like, now we have to rest? Really? Does it feel heavy? Does it feel like, oh my gosh, these Christians are always wanting us to rest and relax? Like, I got too much to do to rest and relax. How do you hear it? And it's always fascinating to me how people hear Scripture and how they view God and how they view this invitation. Do they see it as an invitation, or is it simply just another addition to a list? And we're going to keep this verse in front of us this whole month. And as we step into February and March, and we begin to step into what it looks like to practice the way of Jesus together and the things that Jesus calls us into as invitations for real life and inner peace, does it feel heavy? Does it feel joyful? And it's okay. I think sometimes if we can acknowledge that it feels heavy and hard, that's a good starting point to identify what's going on inside of our internal world. But as we think about the words coming out of the psalm, he enjoys giving rest. The word enjoy is the one that I was drawn to as I was thinking about this verse. I just fixated on enjoy. I'm like, enjoy. What is this word enjoy? What does it mean? And as I began to dig and investigate into the word, it actually can be translated as spinning around. Are you feeling this right now? God's spinning around. Like, I got the image of a child. If you see a child play, they can spin endlessly before they pass out. We as adults might make it one way around and then we're down on the ground. But kids can spin, and I thought about just the delight of God over us as his created beings, spinning around us going, I just have so much to give you, and I want to give you rest. I want to give you rest because I'm a lover, and I want you to know me as a lover and not just as a God that's out here somewhere, but that's right here holding your face, holding your attention, wanting to give you everything that I have. And as we go through this and we think about God spinning and enjoyment and delighting in us, if you feel resistance come up in your body for the practices and the things that we're going to step into, that's totally normal. Resistance simply is an opportunity for you to grow. If you feel triggered at any point, if something is said and you feel like, oh my gosh, that just really triggered a strong emotion in me, that's always an opportunity for us to grow, because what I've discovered in life is that life always has a way of presenting people, circumstances, events, situations that will reveal where we need to grow. And instead of this strong reaction, to reframe it and think, oh my gosh, okay, this is an area where I need to grow. This is an area that needs some process and progress. To see it as a gift, not as an indictment, not as a punishment, but to see it as a gift for you to step into something where you get to be full of God's goodness and love and the expression of who God is as he delights in you. You delight in him. We delight back and forth. We delight in each other. So I invite you to delight in me as I delight in you this morning. Does that work? Are we good, Marty? Can we delight in each other? Come on, this is great. This is the gift. So I want to take us through a case study this morning as a frame to look through. And this case study comes out of the Old Testament. We're going to be looking at a character who reached the point of exhaustion and burnout. And this character, as he reaches the point of exhaustion and burnout, he starts to experience strong anxiety and despondency. That feeling, that sense of hopelessness, like there's nothing good ahead. I've given up everything that I have. I've thrown my whole self into this, but there's nothing good ahead. And God meets this character in that exact space, in that time, and how God meets that person will give us a direction on how God wants to meet us at our point of exhaustion or anxiety or despondency or joy or whatever emotion that you're feeling, creating space for God to come in and teach and lead and direct and give us exactly what the soul needs. Now, the character we're going to be looking at is a character by the name of Elijah. Elijah is a prophet in Israel's big story, a big player in the big story of God, and Elijah is playing a particular role. Now, the trick about playing roles is that many times we can over-identify with our roles in society and start to believe that that is actually who we are. So you'll ask people, tell me about yourself, and right away, we will define ourselves based on our roles. And we'll quickly identify, this is who I am. So if I got up here and says, hey, I'm John, I'm the pastor of discipleship, does that tell you anything about me personally? No, it just tells you what I do. That I'm John, and I'm delighted to be with you, and I'm delighting in myself, and I'm delighting in all that's happening in this room and what God is up to. And I'm a person who loves deeply and passionately and feels great compassion for humanity. That tells you a little bit more about who I am as a person. But all of us, when we think about, okay, who am I really? Where do I fit in society? So quickly we go right into the role and identification with the role. This is what I do in the world. This is where I fit. And so Elijah is playing this particular role. He's a prophet. And as a prophet, what he's doing is he's calling the people of God back to Yahweh, because at this point in history, the people of God, the Israelites, are limping in between two different gods. You can feel this. So they're limping in between Baal and Yahweh, two gods, playing allegiance to both, like kind of playing that middle ground. We're not quite sure what direction to go. And that if you look at Israel's history, their very prayer, their cultural identity is, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord, Yahweh, is one." So like embedded in their psyche, this idea that God is one. God is not two, God is not many, God is one God, completely unified in God's self. And so they've steered off from that and they begin to limp between the two gods. Now at this point in history, Jezebel is the queen of Israel. And as the queen of Israel, she has gathered the incorporation of the worship of Baal, which is a Canaanite god, and the worship of Asherah, which is a Canaanite goddess. She's invited 450 prophets of Baal, 400 prophets of Asherah around her dinner table. So they're sitting, they have her ear. And so the people of God are going along with the direction of the royalty, of this bent towards the worship of other gods. And Elijah's had enough. Elijah's like, my responsibility is to get us back. And so Elijah sets up this really epic battle, the battle of the gods. This is like great storytelling in the Old Testament. So we have the battle of the gods. And we're going to once and for all decide which God is better, which God is the one that's worthy of our praise and our attention. And so Elijah lays down this plan, calls the battle, and gathers all of the prophets of Israel who had been in hiding at this point because of fear of Jezebel killing them. So the prophets of Israel, the prophets of Baal, all 450 of them gather, and all the people of Israel gather, and they start this competition, this showdown. And as the story goes, first up are the prophets of Baal. You got first go. And if this happens, we'll worship Baal. And if not, then I call you to worship Yahweh. And so the prophets come up and they build an altar with wood and they prepare a bowl and they put it on the altar and they start to call upon Baal. They call upon the God of fertility. They call upon the God of sovereignty, and nothing is happening. And so they scream louder, they yell louder, they work themselves up into a frenzy. And then the text even tells us that they cut and lance themselves and they're bleeding everywhere and nothing is happening. As I thought about this to me is exactly what religion does. We always start from a place of fear and uncertainty when religion is running the game. Religion at its very heart, when it's done improperly, is about fear and insecurity because you never know where you stood with the gods. And so you had to do the sacrifice right. You had to offer up yourself correctly. It's a very reactionary mode when you think about people operating from a place of fear. This is why I think religious people tend to be very miserable when you get around them. Almost mean and nasty and judgmental because there's fear underneath all of it. And there's all this fear of like, we don't really know if we're getting this right. We're not quite sure if we're giving enough. We're not quite sure if we're showing up enough. We're not quite sure if we're making this happen. And so there's all this fear and tension and anxiety and worriness and disconnection. The goal then in religion is always, how do we get God back to us? Because if it didn't rain, that's on you. And if the crops didn't grow, that's on you. And if things didn't happen financially, that's on you. And if something tragic happened, that's on you. Or maybe it was God's way of trying to teach you a lesson. So there's always this fear underneath it. Now, as I say this, doesn't that sound familiar? And we think, oh, that was just for those primitive people. And yet, when I meet people today, this is like the undercurrent that's people's motivation for even going after these things. There's so much fear and there's so much uncertainty and there's so much a sense of like, how do we control this thing? Is this the God you know? Is the God you know a punitive God? Is the God you know based on quid pro quo and transactionalism that you're not quite sure what to do, but if you get it right, then he has to bless you? It's like, I've held up my end of the deal, now you've got to hold up your end of the deal, and that's what religion does. It creates and generates more fear. So as this comes up, Elijah steps into the game because nothing is happening. The god Baal isn't responding, even though they're working themselves up into a frenzy. He's watching the whole thing go down, and Elijah stands back. And you would think, okay, this is God's person. This person is so connected to the heart of God that he would exercise some compassion and love here. But what's going to happen is we're going to see the revelation of Elijah's heart come onto the main stage. And the first time we see it in 1 Kings 18:27, throw up that text on there, look at what it says. At noon, so the people had been at it since the morning. So early morning, they've been at it for 6 hours. Elijah began making fun of them. Okay, pray louder, he said. Baal must be a god, lowercase g. Maybe he's daydreaming or using the toilet or traveling somewhere. Isn't the Bible wild? Or maybe he's asleep and you have to wake him up. Now, we read that and we think, oh boy, okay, kind of funny, but is there a layer of sarcasm being used here? Now, sarcasm comes from the Greek word sarkazane, and sarkazane means to tear the flesh like a dog. Think about it. Isn't sarcasm how we tell the truth in our culture? That we have such a hard time sitting down having a conversation, especially when things are uncomfortable, so we begin to implement sarcasm into the system. And if you really start to think about sarcasm, is it helpful? If it really is about tearing someone's flesh, and many times what sarcasm is it's an indirect way, and it's an attempt to tell the truth, but it's very unkind and it's very unclear. Elijah's sarcasm is shining through. Here he is, he steps onto the main stage with this sense of superiority, this sense of like, okay, your God is ridiculous. I'm about to show you how great my God is. And it's so easy to get there, to have this sense of superiority, like we're better than you and your worship of these gods is ridiculous. And here comes Elijah onto the scene, coming from judgment, and he begins to tear them to pieces. And again, we see inside Elijah's heart, and like I've often said, friends, and you've heard me say this before, that whatever isn't transformed in us is going to get transferred onto somebody else. And I'll tell you what, that gets passed on from generation to generation. When we start talking about generational curses, I would encourage you, do the work. so that the next generation doesn't have to lift your load on top of their own. Do the work so that your kids don't have to bear your problems because they've got their own they have to bear. But so often what we do is we don't do the work, and then it's just transferred on to the next generation, and we start to say things, well, that's just in the genetical code. That's not how it works, friends. Transformation is a real thing that can happen when we begin to slow down and take a look at the inner life and say, what things inside of me need to turn and be transformed? Now, it's Elijah's turn. He steps up on the main stage. He gets the altar good and wet, throws the bull on the altar, digs a trench around the altar, invites all the people of Israel to come and pour water into the trench around the altar. He does it 3 times. Let's get it good and wet. Let's make this thing really pop. Let's get this show going. You guys have bought tickets for this event. Let's jack up this thing and make it really hot. And so the suspense is there, and Elijah begins to call upon Yahweh, and it says a fire comes down in 1 Kings 18, 38 through 40. Look at what the text says. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering and the wood and the stones and the dust and licked up the water. Isn't that a great expression? That was in the trench. And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. And you would think at this point, oh my gosh, Elijah's heart of compassion and love, even for the prophets of Baal, are going to come screaming through because this is who this God is. But no, it turns punitive, it turns violent. And again, we have a revelation of what's going on inside of the human heart. And in verse 40, it says, and Elijah said, seize the prophets of Baal, let not one of them escape. And they seized him, and Elijah brought them down to the brook of Kishon and slaughtered them there. 450 people slaughtered. And if you find yourself reading something like that and going, well, that's okay. What? It's never okay to take another human life and just snuff it out. This was an opportunity, from my perspective, to show the love and the compassion of the one true God, that even in the worship of Baal, even in their stubbornness, God can meet them in that space and transform their hearts. But instead of that, there's this, we got it right and you got it wrong and you're out and you're dead and we're going to move forward. What an incredible opportunity was missed from my perspective. That we could have turned it here and called all of these beautiful humans to the worship of Yahweh to experience life. But instead, Elijah perpetuates the cycle of violence because, friends, violence always begets violence. And the more we generate it, and the more we spin it, and the more we try to put a bow on it, it just generates more violence. And look at what happens. Just like one chapter later, you would think, okay, Elijah is at the top of his game. He's got this. He's feeling victorious. There's all this faith and this courage. And then it says in 1 Kings 19, 2-4, so Jezebel sent this message to Elijah, may the gods strike me and even kill me if by this time tomorrow I have not killed you, just as you've killed them. Violence begetting violence, perpetuating this unhealthy cycle. Elijah was afraid, it says, and fled for his life. He went to Beersheba, a town in Judah, and he left his servant there. And then he went alone onto the wilderness, traveling all day. And he sat down underneath a solitary broom tree and prayed that he might die. I've had enough, he said. Take my life, for I'm no better than my ancestors who have already died. And we read that and we go, okay, how does a person go from faith and courage and discipline and love right to I want to die? Things didn't go the way I wanted them to go, and now I no longer want to live. What in the heck is going on in Elijah's soul? This is the deep work that needs to happen to every one of us in this room. That's why we're giving you the invitation to slow down so that you can take the time to go, what's in me that needs to change? And maybe you're in a place of despondency, and maybe you're in a place where it's difficult to even move through the day, and God wants to meet you in that space and begin to help you experience transformation. Again, life always has a way of revealing the areas where we need freedom because of the people and circumstances and events that show up that evoke strong emotion or a strong reaction. It's like, pay attention to what your body is telling you. Pay attention to the emotions, to the charge, to that feeling like, why did that set me off? What is going on inside of me? And then Elijah, he comes to a broom tree. And this is a pattern that we see in the Old Testament. The prophets always seem to come to a tree and then they want to die. That's it. I'd say stay away from trees. But Elijah is about to meet God, not as a punitive God, not as a judge, but as a lover. Because Elijah knows God or knows about God, but I don't know if Elijah knows God. Some of us in the room know about God, but do we know Yahweh? Do we know God as a lover? And instead of being met by a judge, instead of being met by a punitive God, he's met by a lover. And what does God do? The story goes on, and God provides an angel for Elijah and gives him rest. Basically, he tells him to go to sleep. Then he gives him a piece of cake, and then he takes care of his soul. It's like, go to sleep, shut up. Wake up, have some cake. Just enjoy this moment. You need rest. No sermon, no fixing, no lecture, no I told you so. He just shows up and meets Elijah exactly where it is. You know what's amazing about this God is God always makes the first move. We think the onus is on us. It's not. God always makes the first move. God comes to us. God moves towards us. God is a God who comes to humanity and says, do you want to work on this? Do you want to work on this? And God keeps persisting and spinning around and creating and delighting in us, because don't you know that he loves giving rest to those of us who are experiencing despondency? Don't you know that he loves to give us rest when we're exhausted and we're hungry and we're caught up in our internal narrative? Don't you know? Don't you know this God as a lover? Could it be that simple, friends? We make it so complicated. Could it just be you just need to go to bed? You need some rest. Could it be you need some cake? I mean, who doesn't love cake? You need care for your soul. Your soul matters. It's so important. So God provides exactly what Elijah needs in the moment. And the question that's going to keep coming up for us in this journey is, why slow down? Like, what? Why? Because our culture says slowing down isn't an option. You got to keep it moving, man. Why slow down? Because at some point, friends, you are going to have to learn how to be with what actually is. Be with it. Be present in the thing. Instead of trying to run away or avoid it or numb out or watch as much Netflix as you possibly can, it's still there. So I'm going to call this next section of just practicality slowing down. Like, what does it mean to slow down? From my observation, friends, and this just isn't all of you, it's humanity as a whole, most people I meet are in a hurry to get somewhere that they're not. It's like, okay, I'm here, but I need to be here, because if I get here, then I'll be happy and then I'll be fulfilled. And we're just in a hurry, bustling through. And the problem is that wherever you go, there you are. So at some point, you're going to have to turn and face yourself. But that's the terrifying piece, is we don't want to face ourselves, because I can't be the problem. Well, I mean, you're a part of it, are you not? And you have to look at yourself. It's like when people get mad at traffic. It's like, aren't you in the traffic? Like, aren't you participating in making the traffic because you're actually here and you're mad at it? Like, wait, hold on a second. Are you not here? Wherever you go, there you are. And do we have the courage and the strength and the fortitude to stop long enough to go, okay, I want to start looking at me? Most people I meet are on what I would call the linear path of success. And the linear path of success is about accumulation. It's just about getting more stuff, getting the right home, getting the right location, the right partner, the right amount of kids, getting this flow, making sure the career is really popping. Those are all good things. But is that really what life is about? Is it really about accumulating more stuff? Or is the path, the real path of success for me, is the path of the spiritual journey, where we start to really understand who God is and how God sees us, and to completely align with what God says about us as human beings, and asking the question, how is love and compassion, the love and the compassion that I see in God, growing in me and flowing through me? This is not a linear path. It's a very mysterious path because we're not quite sure what's ahead, but we do know that life is not dread and unworthiness. Life is about what's ahead, and it's full of possibilities. This unforeseen future is full of possibilities. And the kind of peace that we hear about in the scripture is not contingent upon an address change. The kind of peace that we see in the scripture can look at the face of any circumstance and say, peace, peace, I give you peace, and I experience it. What if you are exactly where you need to be right now? What if? What if you can learn in the midst of what actually is how to make space for the parts of you that are anxious, the parts of you that are hurt, the parts of you that are feeling despondent? What if you can begin to, instead of trying to get rid of those parts of you, look at them and say, okay, what are you doing here? What are you trying to teach me? Moving towards them with love and compassion and not with judgment. Lay the judgment down. Your body, your life is trying to tell you something. That ahead is good. There's possibilities. Is it going to be easy? I don't know, but there's only possibilities ahead. That's the fullness of what Elijah is moving into. But to slow down long enough to actually ask yourself the question, am I running from something? Am I trying to avoid something? Because if you feel like your life isn't going the way that it's supposed to be going right now, my guess is that there probably is some sort of resistance going on right there. And you got to pay attention to it. What's the resistance? Elijah is being presented with the question that I think all of us have to ask of ourselves is, who am I really? That's a hard question. Because who I am is not based upon what I do or what I have or what other people say that I am. Because if my identity is based on what you would say about me, man, we're all over the place. And again, if I over-identify in my role, or I over-identify with this sense that this is where I fit in society, that can be really squishy. Who am I really? And to begin to acknowledge that, okay, my conditioning as a child, how I grew up, how I was shown how to live this life. Some of us were just in survival mode. Okay, that's your conditioning. But does your conditioning have to define who you're becoming in the future and how you are right now? Or can you look at it and go, yeah, that was my family dynamic, but it's not like genetics. My dad was an idiot, I'm an idiot. No, that's not how it works. My dad was depressed, my grandfather was depressed, I guess I'm depressed. No. Break the cycle. Wake up. Understand that God is I want to transform all of these bits and pieces in your life. Slow down, slow down, slow down. I want to get your attention. And as we begin to go inside and we begin to ask ourselves the hard question, who am I apart from what I do? What's left? If you take away what I do, then who am I apart from what I do? Maybe there's a real you that exists in there. And people love to fight for their limitations, you just don't know. They love to fight for their limited selves. It's like people are out to become the best version of their limited self. All the things that we're not. And one of the things that really frustrates me when I get around Christians is how they talk about how broken they are and how helpless they are. Can we change the lingo to brokenness and helplessness to growing and healing? Doesn't that feel more hopeful? I'm growing and I'm healing. It's like I had lunch with a gal a couple weeks back. We were having top ramen together in Denver. You know the place, DeVar. It was so good. And we were talking about humanity's magnificence, and yet at the same time we're all works in progress. And she kept insisting that she's just a work in progress and there's nothing magnificent about her. And I was trying to just eat my lunch and be at peace, but I'm what is happening right now? It's she's striving to become the best version of her limited self, a self that is rooted in this narrative of I'm not good enough and I'm not lovable and I'm not wanted and I'm inadequate and I'm not safe, a self that is committed and rooted in everything that you're not. Like I've said before 100 times, what you aren't isn't interesting because it doesn't exist. Why are you talking about things that they're actually real when they're not real? We don't live in that time and space. Who are you? At your core, your essence. And then the better question might be to ask yourself, who would I be without these constraints? Who would I be without these limits? And I understand that some of this it probably sounds foreign because I'm introducing you to a reality that you're not familiar with yet. And therefore you assume it's not real. But what if it is? What if the possibilities are endless and they're there? And many of us, we actually start to believe our thoughts. And we believe that we are our thoughts. You're not your thoughts. They're thoughts. They're words. They come and they go. And one of the most common things that I hear people say that I want to rest, I want to come to a quiet mind, but my mind won't shut up. I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and my mind is spinning. Can I give you some insight about your busy mind? Don't try to stop the busy mind. Don't do it. You're going to fail every time. It's like standing in front of a freight train, hoping that maybe I can stop it with my body. You won't do it. Your brain, your mind is an organ. It's designed to think. It's going to think. And it's going to run wild. And the more you try to counter that, the more it's going to agitate it and energize it. So you want to sit and you want to fight your crazy mind. Good luck. And here's the good news. Thoughts are not the problem. It's when you believe the thoughts. You believe the thoughts, that's turned into a busy mind. And what's really fascinating is if you can begin to identify the fact that you're even aware of those thoughts, that's who you are. Your awareness. So you step back, observe the thoughts, let them go, let them run. Don't try to counter them. It's just, you won't win. You're not a failure if you can't sit in quiet. It's your brain doing what it's designed to do. But if you can step back in awareness, and this is what the scriptures call the still small voice that exists in us, that gentle whisper, observing in a non-judgmental way, this is happening right now. And I always encourage people, whenever you hear those derogatory statements that keep coming up that tell you everything that you're not, put a question mark on it. I'm an idiot? I'm an idiot? Really? I'm worthless. I'm worthless? Where's that coming from? Right? It's not true. All of you in the room are inherently valuable. I hate to break it to you. You are inherently valuable. And my encouragement for us is when you become aware of that inherent value, and we begin to transcend these limited beliefs, and we begin to step into who we actually are apart from what we do or have or what other people say we are, that we begin to awaken to, oh, this is what God's been saying all along. The moment he breathed me into existence and said I'm good, and he spun around, and he wants to give me rest, and he wants to meet me as a lover and not as a punitive judge. But he wants to restore my soul. That's what we're going to be doing this month. Just, he enjoys giving rest. He enjoys it. He just enjoys it. You don't have to do anything. You just get to receive it. Now, we thought what would be fun to do. I've gone off script a little bit, Whitney. So, sorry about that. It happens. And we're going to do this practice where I want you to pull out your phones. It's okay. Nobody's going to punish you. Pull it out. Some of you are playing Candy Crush right now, and that's okay. I hope you're doing well. I really do. And we had a QR code up on the screen, and we want you to go ahead and hit that. And if you can see my phone, there's a downloadable wallpaper that says, "Don't you know that he enjoys giving rest to those that he loves?" We figured it might be good for you to put this on their phone because this is generally how we live our lives, right? Through this little mechanism. And if this brings up anxiety and you're like, I don't even know how to do it, our good friend Maggie in the back, by the booth in the back, she'll meet you there and she will download it, put it on your phone and perfectly place it. She did it for me this morning. So if that's you and you're like, I don't even know how to do this, and if you don't want to do it, then don't do it. There's like no pressure. It's all good. People were free. It's okay. But if you want it on your phone, hit that QR code, download it, and then figure it out from there. And if you get stuck, go see Maggie. She would love to help you. Okay? Are we good? It's okay. Be at peace, my friends. Enjoy God, enjoy each other, and experience the delight of God's goodness today. Grace and peace be with you.
This moment is holy. You're never in a hurry. So why ever would I